everyone, Sheree here. Today I'm going to do a 12 by 12 layout using the beautiful Jenny kit from Felicity Jane. It's our August kit this month. So I thought I'd just do a quick run through of what I've got to use here. I've chosen some of the papers from the kit and I've cut them into squares to match the size that my photos came out. They're roughly about 2.5 to 3 inches square. So I've cut my papers out. I've also cut some of the cardstock fringe. Now, when I put my square up onto the cardstock fringe, it was almost exactly half. So all I did was I left everything on that plastic backing, and I literally just got my scissors and cut down the middle. And then to make sure the height was just right, you can see there a part of the pink was just over the top, so I've trimmed that off. You can see it's just a little bit shorter there now, but that is now the perfect size to match all of my pattern paper squares. So I'm going to use that as one of my squares on the grid that I'm going to do on this page. So I'll be able to rough up the cardstock fringe here to add texture to this page, which I absolutely love. But I'm going to leave it on this plastic backing and just put double-sided tape on the back of that, and that will just keep them all perfectly lined up together. So that's one of those squares there. I'm also going to use the jar of sequins from the Jenny kit to make a little shaker square here. I've got some of this, what do you call this, tulle fabric. I'll see if it'll focus there, give you a closer look at that. So you see that tulle fabric? I've just got one layer of that, and I'm going to hand stitch that onto this stripy pattern paper square, and that will help to keep all of those little pieces inside that little pocket. So I'll probably hand stitch that off camera. I'll just use my paper piercer, pierce some holes around the edge and hand stitch it with some embroidery thread. All the rest I will probably do with my sewing machine. So for my background, I thought I would just show you. I've trimmed my white cardstock background down to about 11 by 11 inches, and then I've just cut the very top strip off of the solid colour paper that's in the kit so that I still have this scalloped edge down the bottom here. So I just measured 12 inches up, and that's where I cut. So now I'll be able to layer that background onto that piece, and I've got that pretty scalloped edge down the bottom there. Okay, my journaling I've already printed out onto this thick paper. Now all I did was made a little square in Photoshop, added my text into that box, and I made the outline really light so that I know where to cut, and I'm actually going to cut this into a little tag shape. So I made sure this square will fit nicely inside my pattern paper square. So I'll be cutting that out and making that into a tag. I've got the stamp set here. I think I'll be using this Happy 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 from that stamp set on the page somewhere. And I've also got the Jenny Puffy stickers, and I think I'll use this love word on the page today. Okay, I think that's about it, so I might pop you on fast forward and get started. Okay, so I've got my white cardstock piece that's going to be layered on top of that pink background, and I'm just eyeballing it, trying to center it as best I can. And now I can go ahead and create the grid on my page. So I've got 3 photos. They are all slightly different, even though they do look very similar. I've got the hearts paper going in the center, the cardstock fringe in that bottom right corner. A piece in that top right corner is cut from the bold stripes paper. Then I've got that mustard grid in the top there, the floral to the left, and then that black and white stripe down the bottom left. So I'm going to start off with sticking the center piece down. So I'm sticking it roughly in the center, and then I'm going to grab my T-square ruler and work out where the center is, and that'll act as a guide and allow me to stick all the rest down. So all of that is now done. They're all stuck down nicely. I'm going ahead and making the tag from that little journaling square that I showed you earlier, and I've got that little die cut piece which is from last month's kit that I've just positioned on the top, and I've punched a hole through the middle. And now I'm just going to grab my sewing machine and stitch around that tag and around the outside of that white cardstock background as well. So that's done. I did remove that die cut piece to stitch and then stuck it back on, and now I've just added some twine to the top of that tag, and I can go ahead and stick it onto that top right corner. Alright, so with this cardstock fringe piece I did stick it onto the page, but then I removed it because I wanted to add something else to the top. So I've just added a couple of rows of stitching there, and now I want to run this twine across the top with that gold charm. I think that's from the Denise kit, that gold charm. So I'm just going to use my stapler to staple the twine onto that edge there, and I'll do the same on the other side, and then I can go ahead and trim off the excess, and I'm going to put double-sided tape on the back of that. Remember I said earlier I've left the plastic backing on that so that all of my fringe pieces stay together. So sticking that onto the page, and so that this charm sits nice and flat, I'm actually going to grab a glue dot out of my stash and stick that in behind. So just on the back of that, and that keeps it nice and secure and flat on the page. Alright, so that is now done. Next I'm going to grab my little piercing mat and my paper piercer, and I'm going to go around each of those pattern paper squares and pierce some stitching holes, and I'm going to hand stitch around each of these squares. Alright, so you can see all the holes there. I've done all the squares now, and I've got my embroidery thread there. So now I'm just going to hand stitch around each of those. I'll do it off camera so you don't need to watch me doing all of that, because it did take a little while. So it's now later in the afternoon, so I apologize for the light, but you can see there I had my sequins in that bottom left corner, and as I stitched I added the tulle over the top and then closed it up with the stitching. So now all my sequins are contained. I also added vellum to that top middle square as well. I'm just going to do a little bit of stamping now. I've got the Happy 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 stamp from the Jenny stamp set. Just going onto some plain white cardstock there, and now I'm just going to trim that down using my scissors, and I want this to go onto that mustard yellow square at the top there. And then I remembered that extra piece that I trimmed off the top of the cardstock fringe. So instead of throwing it out, I'm actually going to use it on that stamped piece just to add a little bit more colour there. So I'm sticking that across that mustard square, adding that pink strip as well, and then I've got those two floral die cuts to go onto the page. So double-sided tape on the back of one, and then I'm going to add a foam dot behind that pink one just to add a little bit of dimension. I forgot to mention earlier, you may have seen that paper bow that I put on there. That was from the Megan kit, that little white paper bow. Alright, so all I need to do now is add the title, which I'm going to do down the left side of that right side photo. That was one of the puffy titles out of the Jenny kit. So I'm really happy with how this has turned out. I'll give you a closer look. There are some close-up photos at the end for you to see as well. And I hope you've enjoyed seeing how this one's come together today. So thank you so much for joining me today, and bye for now.